In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King congratulated Egypt's new interim president Adli Mansour after he was sworn in. There has been mixed world reactions to the removal of Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi, but the United States, the United Nations and Europe do not condemn it as a coup. And the Prime Minister says political turmoil in the region has hit Jordan's economy hard, with billions of dinars lost. Good evening and welcome to the news. His Majesty the King congratulated the President of Egypt's Constitutional Court, Adli Mansour, after he was sworn in as interim president. In a cable to the new leader, King Abdullah expressed his keen interest to continue to bolster ties between Jordan and Egypt to fulfill the common interest of their people and embody the brotherly ties and historic partnership between them. The King stressed Cairo's leading role in the region and the world, voicing Jordan's support to the will of the Egyptian people and their choice. He noted that Egyptians had, under all conditions and circumstances, displayed their ability to overcome challenges with resolve, wisdom and courage. In his cable, King Abdullah pledged to continue coordination and consultation with Egypt on various Arab and regional issues and to boost pan-Arab cooperation. Head of Egypt's Constitutional Court, Adli Mansour, was sworn in as interim president a day after the army ousted Mohamed Morsi as head of state. Speaking at the Constitutional Court in Cairo, Mansour said he planned to hold new elections but did not specify when. Mansour said after his swearing in that the Muslim Brotherhood are part of the people and are welcome to help build the nation. Khalail reports.
The people have spoken. Egypt has a new interim president, Adli Mansour. Mansour, a judge and former Chief Justice of the nation's Constitutional Court, replaced ousted President Mohamed Morsi, who was forced out by the military after failing to create a power-sharing agreement with the opposition and solving the nation's economic problems.
I vow to safeguard the Republican system and to respect the law and constitution and to look after the interests of the people and to preserve the independence of the homeland and its safety.
Though Egyptians took to the street in unprecedented millions, reactions across the country varied from elation to disappointment. Morsi, the country's first democratically elected leader, expressed his own disappointment when he briefly appeared on the presidency's official YouTube channel and denounced his removal before being arrested and taken to a military facility along with other members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Pro- and anti-Morsi demonstrators gathered outside Cairo's Constitutional Court as the interim president was sworn in, marking another twist in the turmoil that has gripped the Arab world's most populous country. Some were delighted with the overthrow, claiming the government had failed to fix Egypt's problems during its year in power, including an ailing economy, and vast crowds celebrated on Cairo's Tahrir Square overnight, hailing what they called a second revolution.
But it is the majority of the Egyptian people who forced the army to give back the right we gave it to Mr. Morsi. He didn't behave correctly, so that we told him, give it back to us and we are going to choose somebody else.
However, others vowed to keep protesting until Morsi returns to office, describing the intervention as a military coup.
Despite everything, we say we reject the rule of the military. We will reject it with peaceful moves, but we will confront it, but not with Molotovs like they do. But we will not allow the state to go backwards by tens of years.
Army intervention was backed by millions of Egyptians, including liberal leaders and religious figures, who expect new elections under a revised set of rules. But as calm returned to the streets of Cairo and other cities, Islamists fear a clampdown, as memories of their suffering under the old military-backed regime led by Hosni Mubarak is still fresh in their minds, raising questions about the future of political Islam, which only lately seemed triumphant. Deeply divided, Egypt's 84 million people find themselves once again the focus of concern in a region heavily ridden with conflict. Nancy Khair for the news at 10.
And world leaders weighed in on Egypt's political upheaval a day after Mohammed Morsi was deposed, to the delight of millions gathered in Tahrir Square. International reactions vary between caution and concern, criticism and applause, yet united in encouraging Egyptians to guide their future actions by their top national interests. Zainab Soufa has more on the reactions.
Was it a coup? A difficult question to address the dramatic removal of President Mohammed Morsi after a year in office, marking a twist in the turmoil that has gripped Egypt in the 2 years since the fall of Hosni Mubarak. The United Nations, the United States and other world powers did not condemn Morsi's removal as a military coup. To do so might trigger sanctions. The European Union said it has no plans to reconsider programs to Egypt either.
I'm not aware of any urgent plans to rethink our aid programs at the moment. We, of course, are not in favour of military intervention in politics. And we said very clearly in our statement that we urge all sides to rapidly return to the democratic process in Egypt.
Tunisia's president's party condemned the overthrow as a blow to democracy, as the African Union hinted it might suspend Egypt from all its activities. Turkey was harshly critical of the Egyptian army, calling its move an unacceptable military coup and demanding the immediate release of detained Morsi and other state officials. In this critical period of history, these were the words of the Saudi king's message, joining the Gulf Arab states in praising Egypt's armed forces for the positive and historic role they played in preserving stability. While Palestinians on the streets of Gaza City and Ramallah expressed concern, anger and skepticism, President Mahmoud Abbas offered praise for the Egyptian army, saying it had preserved security. Israel took a cautious approach, declining to comment on Morsi's overthrow, but expressed hopes that developments would lead to the restoration of frozen contacts with the Cairo government. Iran gave a guarded response, calling for the people's legitimate demands to be fulfilled and warning of what it called foreign and enemy opportunism. British Foreign Secretary William Hague said he had been in contact with his Egyptian counterpart to seek assurances, including that democratic elections would be held as soon as possible.
He has assured me there will be early presidential elections, and I have made the point that we regard it, and many other countries will regard it as important, that those elections are totally free and fair, that everyone is able to compete in them. And that means the early release of political leaders and journalists who have been arrested so that they can part in those elections, human rights.
But Hague said he was concerned that military intervention can set a dangerous precedent for the future governments.
If this can happen to one elected president, it can happen to another in the future. And that's why it's so important to entrench democratic institutions and for political leaders, for all their sakes and the sake of their country, to work on this together, to find the compromises that they haven't been able to make in Egypt over the last year.
Raising sharper remarks, Germany called the removal of the Egyptian president a serious setback for democracy in Egypt. As all eyes are on the country, NATO Secretary General said the focus should be on finding solutions rather than discussing whether what happened in Egypt was a military coup or not. Zainab Soufa for the news at 10.
And back here at home, on the fourth day of the 2030 boxing champion held here in Amman, His Royal Highness Crown Prince Al Hussein the Regent attended part of the competitions at the Arena Hall at the King Hussein Youth City. The Crown Prince watched a match between Jordanian boxer Saif Quraish and Qatari opponent Abdul Latif Sadiq, which ended with Quraish winning the confrontation. 180 boxers from Jordan and around the world are participating in the tournament that will end on the 9th of July. The Asian Boxing Championship is the second largest after the European Championship on the agenda of the World Boxing Confederation. And also in our local news, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour said a series of recent meetings his government had in an ongoing dialogue with all social forces on the economy were meant to explain the government's economic policy. He said the dialogue is part of the government transparent approach to expose the reality before the public and be open to all social institutions to bring them into the decision-making process. Mansour told a group of women leaders that since the outset, his government had chosen to go straight to the people to explain a policy line that shuns personal interests and corruption. He said the dramatic political events in the region in the last 2 years had severely hit Jordan, costing it 5 billion dinars in direct losses. The Prime Minister referred to His Majesty the King's recent address at Mutta University, which put special focus on prestige, rule of law, cutting off roads, theft of water and electricity, and encroachment upon state-owned land. He said the economy needed bold action, noting that the National Electricity Company had accumulated huge losses for selling electricity at prices well below the cost price. He said measures were needed to stop wasting heavily subsidized wheat and bread, which had been smuggled to neighboring country. But the Prime Minister said there will be no raise of bread prices in the future. Syria's opposition coalition met in Istanbul in an attempt to name a new leader and prove to its Western backers it can be trusted with advanced weapons to fight government forces. The opposition's inability to unite has made Western countries reluctant to send weapons, even as Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces have made advances in recent months. Rebels are under siege in the strategic city of Hims and trying to hold on to swathes of territory across the country, while the opposition in exile has been unable to exert authority on the ground. The Syrian National Coalition has been without a leader for months after its head quit over disagreement about potential talks with Assad's government. A new leadership for the body of mainly exiled politicians will also need to show that it can forge links with the activists and rebel fighters inside Syria. Member of Syrian National Coalition Executive Committee Farouk Taifour expressed hope a new leadership could be named in the next 2 days. And over to Japan. Japanese scientists showed they have created a functional human liver from stem cells. They say the breakthrough points to future where livers and organs could be created in a lab. The development, which was originally submitted to the International Weekly Journal of Science and Nature last April and published yesterday, could be a giant leap forward for the field of human regenerative medicine. The team of Japanese researchers say they have grown a tiny human liver, only 5 millimeters long, from reprogrammed human skin cells. The research team, led by Yokohama University School of Medicine Professor Hideki Taniguchi and Associate Professor Takanori Takebi, took various kinds of stem cells and mixed them, forming parts of blood vessels and other structural tissues. They planted the cells into the head of a mouse. The researchers say they were amazed when their cocktail of cells began forming into a 3-dimensional lump, which they say represents an early stage of liver development. Iraq's under-20 football team have qualified for the quarter-finals of the under-20 World Cup, now held in Turkey, after beating Paraguay 1-0. Iraq and Paraguay finished 0-0 after 90 minutes of play, with the South Americans reduced to 10 in the last 10 minutes of the match. Iraq substitute Farhan Shakur scored the only goal with a firm header past goalkeeper Diego Morel in the 4th minute of extra time. Iraq continued a remarkable run in its first appearance in the tournament for 12 years. It won Group E, where it drew 2-2 with England, and will now play in the quarterfinals for the second time. Iraq will play South Korea on Sunday. Marion Bartoli crushed Kirsten Flipkens 6-1, 6-2 in a one-sided semi-final to reach her second Wimbledon final. Flipkins dropped her first service game and Bartoli broke again for a 5-1 lead before taking the opening set in 25 minutes. Bartoli made 2 early breaks in the second set before Flipkins received on-court treatment on her heavily strapped right knee. The 27-year-old Belgian immediately broke Bartoli's serve, but the Frenchwoman broke straight back and sealed victory in just over an hour. She will play 4th seed Agnieszka for Sabina Legitsky in the final on Saturday. Now for a quick look at the weather forecast. Pleasant weather tonight in hilly areas and moderate elsewhere, while winds will be northwesterly moderate. Tomorrow normal summer conditions are in the forecast across many regions of the country, but it will remain relatively hot to hot in the desert region, the Gulf of Aqaba and India. Winds tomorrow will be northwesterly moderate, picking up at times, and Aqaba should expect northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly high seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Now, our top stories, once again. His Majesty the King congratulates Egypt's new interim president, Adli Mansour, after he was sworn in. There has been mixed world reactions to the removal of Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi, but the United States, the United Nations and Europe do not condemn it as a coup. And the Prime Minister says political turmoil in the region has hit Jordan's economy hard, with billions of dinars lost. And that's it for tonight. I'm Rad Labtouche. Thank you for watching and have a good night.